Mel Stewart, and this is the SwimSwam podcast. Joining me is Coleman Hodges, SwimSwam head of production and the guy on deck at all the swimming meets. And joining me with Coleman is David Marsh. Founder and head coach of Team Elite since 2007, arguably the greatest year-round club team on earth, professional team and club team on earth. Before that, he was at SwimMac delivering them their greatest accolades in the history of that club. David and I have a little connection there. And before that, he was the head coach at Auburn, winning 12 NC2A team titles. The greatest college coach for a very long time in history until Eddie Reese eclipsed him, if I got that correctly. But of course, Eddie, if we want to put a little asterisk by that, he's been coaching a whole lot longer at that level. And of course, he's 2016 Olympic head coach, 2012 assistant head coach, 2000 assistant coach.
96 and 2000, yes.
96 and 2000. You've coached 49 Olympians. Is that correct?
I think it's more now. I don't actually keep up with the Wikipedia stuff, so I don't know how to change it in Wikipedia. So it's one. I can tell you this, Mel. It's one at a time.
It's 149.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We're just gonna put it out there. I'm gonna say in my opinion, you've really only coached one Olympian, and his name was Mel Stewart.
Boom. Yeah, that was a great way to start, Mel. When you were actually my you are who I practiced on at a ripe old coaching age of 30, and to think now I'm 61. Been a few years, and but it's always been a great ride with you, and so proud of you and what you're doing, and thank you during this time going back to podcasting because you're so good at it, and I love hearing your interviews. Bob's interview was fantastic, and you have a way of asking questions that gets things out of people that sometimes other people can't get that. Well, you're good too, but Mel's the man.
We're gonna use that lens, and we're gonna. This is what we're doing today, guys. If you're listening in, and you're a swim parent or you're a young coach, we're really hoping you get something out of this. David has a lot of talents. His understanding in his swimming, he has deep knowledge. But we're going to focus on something very, very narrow, and I think a lot can come out of it. But I call David the Magic Man. And he's the magic man for one specific thing, and I think it does also shed a light on everything that we love about swimming. But he has this unique talent of meeting people and coaching them for a short period of time, or coaching them towards the end of their careers, making some tweaks to them mentally and to their strokes and all different. It's high level coaching, and he really transforms their life, puts them on the Olympic podium. And I've always been fascinated by it and humbled to see him achieve this over the years. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to hit it hard. So this is what we're focused on. My experience, I was your first guy. Maybe not the first guy. You can correct me here, but in my history, first dude for the David
Olympic
Marsh
medalist, yes, to come through.
So,
yeah.
I showed up on deck. I was with you. I think I was with you 8 weeks, and this was. It was a summer. My father convinced me to do it. He was really worried. I was ranked number 1 in the world in the 200 butterfly, but I wasn't getting over the hump. And I show up on deck, and after the first week swimming for you at Las Vegas Gold, I decided that I hated you. Did you know that I decided that I hated you, and that I was like, I made a very bad decision in that first week?
Well, a lot of times it starts off like that. Is that because the Heineken and the ice cream thing?
Okay, some backstory. My diet, that's another thing. My diet was terrible. I had an awful diet. I'd eat a pint of Haagen-Dazs, and I'd have a few Heinekens for dinner. I ate a lot of empty calories. But so I'll jump us in here. So I show up on deck, number 1 in the world, and you tell me that you're going to change my stroke. And I'm like, why would I change my stroke? It's gotten me this far. I thought I was going to come in and get some great training, and that was going to be the improvement. And you were going to come in and be the architect of the new Mel Stewart butterfly. And that shook me to my core. That made me very, very insecure. And yeah. Did you know that before I showed up on deck?
No, I actually, interesting hearing you say that now, that you're emotional about that, because you were actually quite respectful in listening and being curious. I think you were always into any way you could get better, so you were totally paying attention. And what I saw in your stroke now, Frankie Bell had set you up beautifully with that sigh breathing and the rhythm of your butterfly. But to me, the butterfly had started to flatten off a little bit more, and I thought you had that natural movement in the water, which we wanted to keep. At the same time, I wanted a little more extension at every cycle, and I was trying to pick up a little more distance per stroke and then keep the same stroke rate. And honestly, I was also 30 years old, and I knew everything at 30 years old, so I was arrogant enough to think that I could do that, and it sort of helped out a little bit.
I like young, arrogant coaches. I think we make our greatest discoveries when we're young. So I'll try to paint a more dramatic picture here. This is, you don't know what someone's internal landscape is, but for me it was you were very precise. You said, because I did say, I'm number one in the world, and this. There was pushback. It might have been polite because I was raised by a great father, but it was angry and made me insecure. If you're insecure, you get angry, and what it really boiled down to was, how do I say this? It was, you said to me, you're not going to get an American record. You're not going to get a piece of history. You're not going to get an American record or a world record, and your Olympic gold medal is not secure unless you make some changes. And that really just hit me in my chest. And here's the problem: I knew it was true, and it felt like I got hit by a 2x4, and I had to get over that, and I had to get over it quickly because we didn't have a lot of time.
Right.
So you might not remember that, but I do.
Well, I think also one of the things at that time was there was a dominant person in your event that looked like he was moving toward being unbeatable, even though you were number one in the world. You were sort of hanging on at number one, and Gross was coming, man. And so for you it's always the case when the moment you start to get complacent or even looking back at holding your position is the moment you start getting past. And so if you're not progressing, you're not you're going to get past eventually. So in whatever position you're in, you have to look at the complacency is the biggest enemy. And I think just by changing coaches, you to some degree you challenged yourself with that, and I think that made a big difference. And then it was a lot of fun sort of watching, having you doing challenging sets with you, and some other things that we can talk about as we go through this.
Well, let's get into the nitty gritty of it, and let's use that as a jumping off point so that we can go to other athletes. So for me, it was what you told me was counterintuitive. I was doing a full, long, loping stroke, and I was emulating Michael Gross, who was 6'9". And so my hands were entering the water, almost touching out front.
Yeah.
And you spread my hands to shoulder width or slightly more, and based on comfort. So I was taking more strokes per lap, and that was counterintuitive. It didn't make sense, but you explained it to me as, look, you're slowing down. You have a hiccup in your stroke. You're slowing down. You're losing your inertia. It's tasting you twice as much energy. By actually adding more rotation, more stroke cycles per 50, your last 50 is going to be stronger. And you were correct. I sensed it, felt it. Within 10 days, I was feeling it, and my brain was rewiring. So that was the Marsh magic in my world, just a piece of it. Do you have this history with other athletes? And who was next on your list? What was the change? Who was the next athlete where you stepped in and said, "This is what I'm going to do for you"?
Yeah, I would say after I coached you and the Las Vegas Gold sort of pro group back then, it was sort of its first effort to be sort of a pro group. Bart Pippinger and Tyler Mayfield, and we had a nice group out there, but nothing like what has happened lately. But then I went to Auburn, and so I really shifted in many ways the sort of the mindset I had, and the reason I bring this up now, because it really made it one of the reasons later on that I left Auburn when I did is because I felt like I wasn't doing as good a job with world-class swimmers, because I was really running this monster of a ship at Auburn trying to maintain championships. And I wasn't narrowing in on some of the individuals that were the best in the program as well as I could have. We won some lots of medals as the Auburn coach, but I always felt like, man, we should have taken more time on this or this. And so that plays into this. So during my window of time at Auburn, I really shifted when I went to Auburn into my passion of raising Auburn from, our men's team didn't have any NCAA qualifiers the year before I took the job, to try to become competitive. And the women's team, the first year I was there, we had one swimmer go to NCAA championships, Christy Kruger, Christy Jett now. And at NCAA, she disqualified in her only event, the 100 fly. So that was my kickoff to Auburn years. But obviously we got better as the years went on. By 94, we won the men's title. And then 97, should have been 96. That's a different story, a different podcast. But 97, we won our first men's title. And that was, then it really exploded, because by then we became the place where there was an article written up about us. The name of the article, one of the articles I'm most proud of, is called No Names to No Names, and NO names to KNOW names. And that was really what we did at Auburn. And so to some degree, what we were doing with the Dynamo Swim Club when I was coaching there, and then Las Vegas Gold, was helping people, and I think helping systems. When you got assistant coaches like, Rick Gunther and Bob Bowman on your staff at Las Vegas Gold, pretty good chance you can be successful with those kind of people. Same thing happened at Auburn. Had great assistant coaches, developed a great culture. But some of the missing piece, I think, was the commitment, my ability to give enough commitment to the professional swimmer, and really the tip of the spear. Because championships at NCAAs are not won at the tip of the spear. They're won by making finals. Get lots of top eights, you can win the meet. That was the formula we used, and we didn't spend a lot of time. If we didn't have a ton of winners at NCAAs, we would be focusing on finals. And so in 2007, when Mark Schubert and Jeff Gackel and actually Frank Reich, who's now the head coach of the Baltimore Colts, they approached me, and not Baltimore, I'm sorry, Indianapolis Colts, excuse me, Indianapolis. When they approached me about, hey, we have an idea of bringing you over to Charlotte. It was very interesting and tempting. And then when it played out with Mark's vision, it just sounded like the right thing to do. And it was at a good time. I was on my 5th athletic director at that point, and things changed every time I had a new athletic director. And it was something to do. So, and I do think that
you're also a creative person. It's anybody who knows you knows that you live in the flow. You like to engage, and you like to be creative, and and not all coaches are that way, but you have that gear, and I think that you needed a challenge, and you needed to build something, and that was. I mean, we talked before this all happened, and one of our closest friends, Jeff Gackel, who is one of the greatest supporters of swimming,
absolutely,
and USA Club history. I can't express to you how excited he was, and he was excited for that reason. He's like, Marsh is creative. We're going to do interesting things here. Anything's possible.
Yeah, it was and another part of that was that not only the pros, but I got a chance to work with the develop age group programming. And I had always been somehow I was printed by watching Paul Bergen's program at Nashville Aquatic Club. And when I saw, and they had a team where almost all their swimmers looked like they swam the same way. They had a model of Tracy Calkins, but they all sort of swam the way of Tracy Calkins. And I was like, that's what I want to develop at Swim Mac. And at that point, we were Mecklenburg Aquatic Club, as you remember. But it was one of those things where what I expected was fantastic technique, and I've always preached between 11 and 14 years old, you need to get your technique down, because that's, like when you had Frankie Bell, you were fortunate. Not many people had a woman like that at the age you had it to set you up for the future. Well, she's a technical master, and that's a really key thing at that point. And so I got a chance to oversee that. And by then my kids were somewhat swimming. And so I could see that, having some control over a big club, I might be able to have a big impact on a large group of people. And I felt like between what we were able to do with the team elite group and intermixing them with the total club of about 700 swimmers in Charlotte, made some magic for several years. And for, at least the, first few versions of board of directors that I had and people I worked with. So it was a very special time, especially as we were building it, because I could go on the deck and I could see not just the top swimmers improving, but I walk on the deck and say, there's nobody in our pool, our orange blue meet. I go in the pool and there'd be nobody overreaching in backstroke. There'd be nobody pulling too far back in breaststroke, because those were no-nos by all the coaches. They're just standards set by the program. And from there, we can launch. And in that window of time, we broke, I think, all the 17, 18 men's national age group records. We set all kinds of 13, 14, 11, 12 records. So, and we put a lot of premium on relays, even for club swimming back then. And it was a lot of fun. But I'm enjoying San Diego now, and so it's and with this Hall of Fame thing, it's really caused me to go back in a little bit more reflection on my career of what I've done to now. But I can tell you, Mel, I mean, I feel really blessed that Peter Lynn moved out here to San Diego. I've had Bob Groseth close to me. I've had these mentors, and you earlier said that after I'd won 12 national championships, that Eddie took it over. Actually, it was my mentor, Richard Quick, that went to 13 next. And then Eddie took it all over. And thank goodness he did, because he's done it with, one side of the equation with the men's side, and done an amazing job in college swimming. So, I mean, I'm delighted to be even anywhere in the mention of that crowd. So, but what I think in the big picture, Melanie, sum this up in terms of just the bigger picture, the development of athletes, whether it be through a whole career of an age group, through senior level, or it happens to be a 4-year window of college, or an athlete comes in like you did in a matter of a few weeks, or like Anthony Irvin did, then at the end of the day, here's the deal. What does it take to get the performance out of them at the right time? Because I think a lot of people can get performance out of themselves, but maybe it's not the right time. It won't be at that special moment of the Olympic Games or Olympic trials or NCAA finals. It may happen sometime at a conference meet, or it's some qualifying meet. That's not what you're preparing for. You're preparing them for a at the moment, the predetermined moment in our sport where we have to perform. And that's a very different thing than just, how fast is your best time. No, it's performance at the moment.
Tell us a story. Good. Let's make it real. Let's go with someone that everyone knows and loves, Cullen Jones. I remember when Cullen Jones landed on deck, it was like, I remember the discussion about it behind the scenes. It's like, can he pull it off? And my thought was, he's in the best place on earth. He's with the Magic Man. Paint a picture. When did Cullen show up on deck, and how much time did you have before Olympic trials in 2008?
Yeah, Cullen came in. I had a pretty good amount of time with him. Now Mark Schubert had a lot to do with helping that happen. Mark really encouraged Cullen he was the national team director at the time, and was trying to get people in the right places to get, to earn more medals, which I thought was great. And, so he reached out to me, Cullen reached out to me, and I was, I didn't have really very many pros at that point. I had Jeremy Knowles and Mark Gangloff who come with me from Auburn. Had a few others that had come along, but when Cullen decided to come aboard, it was a big change for me, because I had all these good sprinters, Cesar Cielo and Fred Bousquet, the guys that were, by then had become some of the best in the world in their sprints. And but Cullen, he was a very different kind of guy. His mentality is what I had to work with him. And fortunately, because we had, I think it was about 6 months to work with.
Still a small window.
Yeah, no, I had to, at the beginning, I just had to get to know what he was doing, because I really didn't feel like his sprint stroke was as powerful as he had the potential to be. He swam a little bit more like a 200 freestyler. He swam with a lot of lift in his stroke, so he actually sculled a lot more than most sprinters. And so we spent a lot of time trying to get him for the 50 freestyle to be much more powerful and aggressive up front, right? So there wasn't a lot of sideways scull. It's like hand in and dig and go. And so for Cullen, a lot of it too is his mentality. So the next thing was working on getting him stronger than he was at that point. And for him, strength wasn't just how much weight can you lift. Muscular endurance was real important, because that's what he wasn't quite as good at. So things that had to do more repetitions and things like that ended up helping out. And then the biggest thing was really when to, press the gas, because Cullen was very unique in that I found, after coaching him for a long time, that what I needed with Cullen is just keep him swimming, because he was also doing all kinds of public appearances. He's one of the best speakers we have in our sport. He's a role model to so many people, and he should be a role model because he's an amazing human being. And but what I had a hard time doing is getting him to really dig in training. I mean, he didn't really like to train. He loved to race, didn't like to train so much. So really had, when my best thing I realized with Cullen is and it's only after a couple seasons, but I did realize after that was that Cullen, about 8 to 10 weeks out of big meets, he'd get really serious. He'd lock in. And then before that, maybe not so much. He'd take care of business here and there. He'd have a speech here. He'd have a thing there. He'd have a girlfriend there. He'd have things. But about 8 to 10 weeks out, he would lock in, and it'd be like one day he'd come in and he wouldn't say anything. I just see it in his eyes. It's all right. He'd be there on time. He'd be there early. He'd be like, okay, time to get ready. So it's like a boxer going into a training camp and saying, all right, now it's time to go. And he just had this sense of when he needed to start getting ready for the big meets. And so he taught me that in that kind of way. But yeah, for sure with Cullen, it was several things that we adjusted. It wasn't one thing. It wasn't a stroke. It was several things.
Okay, so you got him 8 weeks out, but going into 2008, we had an unusual situation. 2004 was a step up at Olympic Trials and when we were in Southern California, but we're going to Omaha. The pressure was on. So you have this guy who's frankly raw and green that you've been molding for 6 months, and he's stepping on deck in Omaha, and that is a pressure cooker environment. How did you manage his head, especially a sprinter, in that environment? Because that was the first one, and it was the first. It was very intense because it was overwhelming. The venue with 15,000 seats. Yeah. So how did you manage that?
Well, fortunately, Cullen is a bright lights guy. So when the bright lights are on, you would get the best out of him. And knowing that, it was more like pacing him. So what we did, for example, was we brought him in only 3 days before the race. So we didn't bring him in 4 or 5 days like a lot of people did. 3 days before the race, because I didn't want him too amped up too early, because I knew he would be. And he's ready to go when he gets there. And fortunately, he makes the relay in the 100 freestyle, which really takes care of the 50. Then the pressure is off a lot more. But I was most worried about the 50 being toward the end of the program. And if he didn't make the 100, the 50 would have been really tough, because it had been there the whole week. He'd have been, he's emotional when he races. He's emotional for his teammates, and he's, part of Team USA by then. So he's, everybody's loving on their different teammates, and they're heartbroken when they don't make it and thrilled when they do. And that's not just a roller coaster for the athletes that are at the trials themselves. It's for their teammates, their USA national team teammates, and people they went to college with, the people they cared about their whole life. So the real magic with him was just to try to keep him calm. So we'd bring him to the pool in the middle of the day when it wasn't so much seeing all the different swimmers that would want to come say hi to him. So let's try to bring him in kind of on the down low. So that's really the biggest adjustment that we did for him. And then the other thing was just every time at the Olympic Trials, I find myself talking to the athletes about training them for the first 35. And if they can learn how to use the free, easy speed, the first 35 of races, or in the case of the 200, the first 75. And I saw Davis on your interview. He talked about not knowing how to use that speed. I really didn't have enough time with him to some degree. But if he could have floated the first 75, he'd have been just as fast, and then would have had a lot more energy for the end. But, it's hard to duplicate. Well, you can't duplicate the Olympic trial setting as far as the venue creating the energy for the beginning of the race, and the athlete not having to give any effort.
Let's take a pause there, because here you've got to mention that Davis Tarwater. There was the same. Davis was not the same swimmer after he had been training with you, and this guy came into the event into trials, and my jaw was slack because he was swimming so many events, finaling and everything, and his speed was extraordinary. And this guy was, he swam the mile as an age grouper, and the 400 IM, and he was a 200 flyer. He came from the top end down, and suddenly he had this extraordinary speed, and it was he was surprised by it. How did you change someone like that? I'd known that kid since he was 8 years old. I was jealous of this little kid. He's always been a kid in my head, of all the speed that you had created for him. How did you do that?
Well, really, it's what we've done, at Auburn, really from Auburn forward, which are two big tenets. One is recovery. Recovery is a really critical part of high level preparation. And the better you can recover as a professional, the better you're going to be able to attack the next session or the next week's session or this cycle of training. The second thing is you always want to be fast. So we do speed work in my program, like raw speed work. I'm talking about blast 25s, 15s. Mel, I don't think that was in my philosophy when you were there. I'm sorry. You probably been a hell of a 100 flyer also.
Let's take a pause right. Let me take a pause right there. Every time that I have shown up on deck in the modern era, every time Coleman's shown up on deck to do a practice in pancakes, the joke is, Coleman was like, Mel, did they go more than a 25? And I'm like, no, I never saw anybody go more than an all out 12 and a half.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. I did not experience that.
No, you didn't. But from Auburn forward, and really that had a lot to do with Mike Bottom. I partnered with him right away. Dave Bottom, Mike Bottom were two of my assistants, and we really went after speed because we knew that would help us with NCAA points. And really what we've done is we carried that over to all the summers we were going. Now, there was a window of time we had, Haley Pearsall and Adrian Bender on the team. They weren't going to get speed, so they didn't do speed. So Ralph Crocker, God rest his soul, he would take the distance guys, but pretty much everybody else I've ever coached does speed work at least twice a week. And here's the thing about Davis, though. When Davis started doing speed work with the sprinters, and Davis pushes everybody. So he'd be calling out, the sprinters, and he said, like, oh, don't let this middle distance swimmer beat you. And honestly, he would win a lot of races in the power sprint days. So, Cullen and Bernelli and those guys, they were not happy to have Davis kind of blow in on sprint days and beat them. And so he raised the whole climate of that. So I'd say the recovery and the underpinning of speed, staying fast all season is a big part of where he found sort of new speed. And honestly, he was focused more on the 100 and 200. And he told you about that 100 freestyle I did in Knoxville, unshaved. I think it was the fourth fastest time. I wish he would have been considered for the 400 freestyle relay because he'd have probably made the night relay. But he, in that window of time, we felt like the 200 fly was a little bit better event for him. So he put a slight priority on that.
He shared it in the podcast. What do you go? 48 what?
He went 48.7, and at that point, that would have made the team. Yeah,
in training camp.
In training camp with I think he told you it was at the end of a long day where he signed autographs because he was the star in Knoxville where we were in the training camp. And but at the end of the day, Davis, he calls his gold medal precious. At least he did back then, and he said, this was he was able to go through the steps and finally, to dramatically make that Olympic team by Michael Phelps stepping away from the 200 freestyle and him stepping in, and then he delivered at the Olympics. He split a 145 at the Olympics, and again, arguably should have been on the night relay, but after coaches discussed it, there was a vote, and that didn't go that way. But
here you go. Let me stop you there. So what's fascinating about him, and the reason why I was jealous of Davis Tarwater, making me bitter, was because he was this guy who was always coming home in the back half. He would eat your lunch on the last 50, and you transformed him to that guy who was having to hold back because he had so much easy speed. And that's something that everyone wants to have. And certain athletes, you would think it's unachievable. I thought that was unachievable for Davis. Now, let's give our listeners, let's give them a taste. Give us a little appetizer. What is a Marsh sprint set that is just there to take a guy like Davis Tarwater and turn him into a sprinter? What's a go-to sprint set?
Well, there's two things. So one would be racing. So we again, like I said, at the end of the day, it's about performing in the moment. So we'd actually put pressure on them to race each other, and we would call a winner. Call a winner and a bunch of losers. So the goal was to be the winner of these sprints. So, but the sprints we would do would be like, laying on your stomach. Then when the whistle blows, you shift in the water real quick and try to be aquatic to make the spin and get to the wall first, touch the wall first. Or it might be right foot out of the water the whole time and head up. So it might be something but it's still again an aquatic challenge to get them to move. We would also race all four strokes. So we would, everybody would, do a 25 breaststroke, 25 butterfly with your head up, maybe with a flutter kick. So there's generally about 16 to 20 races when we do that. Or it's another version where we're doing power shooters, more like a circuit. We'd be doing power shooters. We'd be doing fins, paddles, maybe eight 20-meter blasts. What else do we do? We'd put, some kind of resistance assistance. So stretch cord, pulling people in the stretch cord. And the pattern there we have always used is, first one is just glide and hold your body position as high as you can, let it be pulled along. Second one is outswim the cord, so swim much faster than the cord, move your hands faster than the cord, a Bill Boomerism, but to sort of confuse the nervous system. And then the third one would be perfect tempo, perfect technique, and eliminate resistance, so get more narrow. So that's the little sequence we'd follow with swimming with stretch cords in threes, and I think it works pretty well. We've done it at least my whole career with swimmers. So that's something.
We're going to keep it tight. We're down to 6.5 minutes. So what I want to know from you is we're winding down is, let's just say that I'm a swim parent, or I'm a 12-year-old kid, or I'm a young coach. What do you want to do with that kid who is in this formative years, this developmental years, where they have the dream of swimming year-round in college? What are you trying to bring to the pool and their talent, specifically regarding speed?
Yeah, I think the deal is that speed is gained through, if you're a parent of or you're an age grouper right now, speed is gained through maturity. It's not gained through necessarily something you're doing in the water. And Davis had man strength by the time I got him. Now at Michigan, he probably wouldn't have been able to generate the same type of speed. So maturity and physicality outside the water, things between I've told so many kids of 10 and under, parents of swimmers, when they talk about, how can, I get a swimmer like yours? I said, if they're 10 and under, send them to gymnastics, send them to martial arts, complement what they're doing with something else that's very physical, and make sure we get them back to swimming. But I think that sets them up for a foundation of a career to where they appreciate and have the capacity and ability to be physical. And I think that this is one of those hidden things during this COVID virus time that I think we're going to come out of this and have learned something, because a lot of these young kids have done this new thing that they hadn't done in a long time. Go outside and run around and chase things and climb a tree. That's happened, I think, during COVID for a lot of kids. And I think when they go back to the pool, they're going to go, wow, I have some new strength. Our age groupers with the Stingrays, this team here, we have a team here in San Diego. Their first practice was today. And sure enough, a lot of the kids came in, and they were, Dave Cook has been doing a Zoom call with them and coaching them through some Zoom workouts, lots of pull-ups, lots of physical things, and then get out and go surf, get out and do things. A lot of them came in. It's like, whoa, that's a different kind of physical looking person. And they hadn't swum in, 2.5 months in a swimming pool. But I think we're going to find that. So, and further and answer your question is, so it goes from the maturity to physicality to really, I think, technical. There's things in order to have speed that you need to be able to do that will compromise your stroke. So unfortunately, I think to some degree, with all the short course yards emphasis of NCAA now, and getting really good at it, they've found how to use the walls a lot better, the underwater kicks a lot better. So there's a lot less swimming going on and a lot more tempo going on. That doesn't always carry over to long-term swimming. So I always try to convince people to learn how to swim fast and speedy with your full stroke. Don't go to race tempo. Don't go to scrambling when you're young, because it's going to compromise your ability in the future to swim well long course. You're not going to transition to that. And at the end of the day, college coaches can speed up your tempo. That's not a problem. But when you're an age grouper, learn to swim fast, but swim fast always valuing distance per stroke.
All right. We're down to 3 minutes. Let's just drop a bomb on you. How do you beat a guy on the Olympic platform that has a 42-inch vertical leap in the 50 free? I would, if I was in the 50 free and I was a great sprinter, I would be overwhelmed facing off with Caleb Dressel. How is anyone on earth going to step onto that into that final with the other 7 guys and go up against him? What do you do?
Well, maybe this is part of what has worked for me over the years too. Mel, last I checked, he's a human being. And human beings have potential and they have problems and they have, in his case, he has a giant program to swim. And I hope he swims an amazing program because he swims for USA. But my job is to help the swimmers that I'm coaching right now, and that's what I'm focused on. And I do have some good sprinters out here. But the understanding is that, and I want the young listeners to listen to this especially, in swimming, none of us are natural in the water. I mean, I go down to the La Jolla Cove and watch the seals swim. They're very natural. But the Garibaldi that swim below the seals, they're little tiny, pretty little orange fish. Well, the reality is, as soon as they do this, they're going faster than Ryan Lochte ever traveled underwater in about a foot. Okay. So we're not natural in the water. So for we human beings to learn how to become more aquatic and to swim faster in the water, that's a lifelong journey. And that's something that turns into potential. The next thing is that learning, that there's this thing where this is not potential. This is potential. Okay, how's that learned? That's learned in practice. So,
hey, David, for everybody listening, the Magic Man went from a dropped elbow to a high elbow.
Okay, yeah. So so if you don't set up your stroke, your potential to ever swim fast is radically changed. Okay, if you drag your legs when you swim, okay, that is not the way anybody's going to race at a high level. You have to kick all the time, kick strong all the time. So there's just basic things like this that a young person needs to do to develop into the next level. And I think the other thing is I would go through the version of what I think is critical to performance. And if I had to put them in big chunks, it would be first, have your clarity of your goal. Be really clear what your goal, then make the plan. Mel, you and I had to talk about making up what the world record looked like, what the splits would look like. You didn't want to, but we did it, and I think that made a difference. Then you have to create a team around you to support you. Next thing is you have to make the adjustments in your strokes and things, and adjustments in your lifestyle. Prepare, that's the hard work, that's the snotty stuff you got to do. And then finally, perform. Prepare yourself to perform. So maybe one day you have a John Hargis or Pat Calhoun that come out of the complete blue and qualify for the Olympic Games. And so it's been a pleasure visiting with you here, Mel.
We'll end it there. Thanks. You're going to be back?
Yeah, man. I'm anytime you need me, and we're back in the water. I'm actually at the house here right now. We have our remote weight room set up over here at the house here. So the Pebbly and Lissa were just working out here behind me, so they were a little distracting to me while I was doing the podcast. But you keep doing this stuff, Mel, because it's nice to hear you and Coleman keep putting out good content for us to keep learning, getting better, because that's what it's all about.
Hey, do you love SwimSwam as much as I do? Do you want hours of endless practice footage, race video, and a guide to the best pancakeries in the country? Then subscribe to our YouTube channel below. And follow us on social media at SwimSwam News on Twitter and Instagram. If we get 1 million followers, I might just eat 1 million pancakes. Only one way to find out.